welcome or welcome back to Life on the Ranch. Today, I just wanted to share with you some of our views from our trip to Yosemite. So we'll be going through some of our pictures as well as tips if you decide to visit. So without further ado, let's get started. So I wanted to give a few tips, things we learned that I wish we knew before we went to Yosemite. First, if you go before um, like the end of May, you don't need a reservation to go and like get a day pass for your car. And for the car, it's only $35. So, pack your car full of people. $35 split between a lot of people is not that much money for a day pass. And it lasts you the entire week, which is crazy. Um, so that's a great deal. Um, I would say the other thing to note is do not underestimate how large Yosemite is and how much time you're going to be spending in the car driving to different areas of Yosemite. And I'm going to be going over what I think would be probably the most efficient way to get through the entirety of the park, given where we went, what we saw, and what we like to do. But of course, that's more subjective. But I would say a huge tip is that a lot of your time is going to be spent in the car, unless you plan ahead where you're going to hike and what you're going to see when, which can be hard to do if you don't have a map, which is why I'm going to give you kind of an outline of the park. The third thing, building off of that, since so much of the time in the park is driving, and it's in it's in Yosemite, so it's mountainous. It's not quick driving, and it's surrounded by two national forests, the Stanislaus National Forest as well as the Sierra National Forest. Um, so once you get outside the park, it doesn't suddenly become a city. It's very much rural. There's a small downtown, like a small downtown, kind of outside of the park, um, but not much. So what we had done, as we had for the entirety of our trip, was get an Airbnb. I would highly recommend against it, just because the closest thing that we could find was an hour outside the park, or like 40 minutes. I think it was like 40 minutes outside of the park, but it was an hour and a half to the trailhead. So it was just so much time wasted driving to an Airbnb, especially when if you like plan enough ahead, you could get a room in a lodge that are much closer. So I would recommend looking into lodges, or hotels or bed and breakfast closer to the park. I didn't see any major hotel chains, so I didn't see like a Holiday Inn or anything. They were small locally owned lodges. So you're probably going to have to go onto Google Maps and look for them. Uh, but I promise you there are tons of lodges. We saw them as we were driving. I would try to get one of those, even if it's a little bit pricier than an Airbnb, um, for a little bit smaller of a room, especially if you don't have a lot of days to work with in Yosemite, because it cuts your driving down so much. Finally, I would say that Yosemite overall, I I felt like was one of the grandest parks I've been to, in terms of the impressiveness of the landscape. I would highly recommend going. But in terms of the trails themselves, um, just because of how spread out they are, it's not, in my opinion, one of the best hiking experiences because, again, you're driving between hikes quite a bit. Um, the way that we had done things, and I don't know. It's like more touristy than like something like a really good state park. Um, for example, one of my favorite state parks that I've been to is Holly River State Park in West Virginia. Very hilly, very scenic views, waterfalls, um, but it's like it's camping, so you could bring a tent and you could like it was more of the outdoorsy experience than like Yosemite, but Yosemite was obviously like grander in terms of everything. The waterfalls were bigger, the mountains were larger, the valley was impressive. Like there was nowhere you turned that it was not like, oh, I should get a picture of this while I was in Yosemite. Um, so, how do you make your Yosemite trip the most efficient? Um, I would say decide like group by area. So, obviously, like the valley is kind of what is known, Yosemite is known for. Like, you drive in through the gates, and eventually you hit the valley, and you're surrounded by mountains. You can see Half Dome. Um, There's the visitor center. You can get maps and information like about the park in the valley. So I would say like the valley should be day one, um, of your Yosemite experience because you can pick up the information, um, like picnic in the valley area, walk the valley loop, that like heads to Mirror Lake and hit lower falls, all very easily within the daylight time, and that would give you time to then head back to your lodge, um, and get dinner, whatever, relax, rest. Um, but also in the valley, if you are into more strenuous hikes, you can hike from the valley to Glacier Point. It is a tougher hike. It's not impossible, but it's long. It's 4 miles to get to the top. So it's an 8 mile round trip hike. Uh, so if you do plan on hiking to Glacier Point, plan for it to be that long and for it to be quite steep, at points. And if you're not great with altitude change, like I'm not very good with altitude change, even if like I can do the hiking part, like the air changing very fast, like the pressure like gets to me. Be aware of that as well. It's a pretty large, ridiculous mountain, so um, there's that. But you can do that from the valley as well, um, and it's definitely a very pretty hike. Uh, we split it up. We did up half and back down to get a view of the one of the waterfalls, inside of the valley, just like a better view of it. And then we also hiked down the next day from the starting from the top and then down and back, um, to get a better view of like the entirety of the valley. It was more like one of those rim trails. It was very cool. I would highly recommend doing that, uh, as a hike, especially because, well, I'll get into that in a second. So then day two, if you don't hike the Glacier Point Trail as your day two, which you totally could, if you still want to see Glacier Point, which I highly recommend, you can drive up to Glacier Point Park, Um, and then there's like a snack area and stuff after you're done like hiking. You can get like snacks, and like that's where a gift shop is. Um, hike like there's like this like rim area that like has stuff for kids, but it's still very pretty, not just for kids. But then I would suggest hiking down from Glacier Point until you hit the zigzags, where it starts to get steep, and then come back up. It's well worth it. It's beautiful. The vistas are great. I hit puberty. Um, a wonderful, wonderful hike um, up there, and then you get your snack, and it's just a good time. The third day, I would say, you could go to the Mariposa area of the park. This is where the redwoods are, like the really big freaking trees that live like thousands of years without exaggerating. There's like a grove of them. So you would head to there and then hike the trails that are over there. That's what I would suggest is your day 3. That way, you're not having to drive like into the valley, then up to Glacier Point, or into the valley and then to Mariposa, or to Mariposa, then you want to go all the way up to Glacier Point. Don't do it. Additional things you can do at Yosemite that I wish we knew about. So, as I said, in day 1 on the valley, if you do the valley loop to Mirror Lake, which is not really there's the valley loop, the valley loop, and then there's this like Mirror Lake trail. I'm talking about the Mirror Lake Valley Loop trail part. When you get past Mirror Lake, there's a second area where you can like swim. It's not deep, but it's certainly refreshing, and it's very beautiful, and it's great for kids. But also, like, I wish I would have had my swimsuit so I could have like splashed around. That was something I did not know it had that I wish I knew it had. So when you're doing the Mirror Lake hike or your valley hike, um, bring a swimsuit. Like, wear it underneath your clothes so that you can participate in the swimming action that happens there. Okay, so we're here at Mirror Lake. It's one of the easier trails we've hiked here at Yosemite. It's long but relatively flat, and the payoff at the end is really nice. So it's definitely like picture worthy. But if you're an inexperienced hiker and you just want to get some miles logged, this is a great place to come and hike. It's lower in the valley. There's no like peak you're trying to reach. So I definitely recommend to this hike. And we'll be giving you more trail hike tips in a moment. Because it's definitely worth it. And maybe just because I wasn't super exposed to Yosemite, because I live on the East Coast now, and I originally lived in the Midwest. Like, I don't have a lot of like West Coast knowledge. I was surprised by how beautiful the waterfalls are. You definitely want to go in the spring or summer to get the most out of the waterfalls in Yosemite. It would still be pretty like without them or when they're smaller, but it was absolutely breathtaking with the amount of water in the waterfalls. And that's just a tip you can apply to anywhere that has waterfalls. You're gonna want to go in the spring because the snow is melting. And we did see snow while we were there. Stan threw a few snowballs at me. But that would be my like general advice for Yosemite. I would definitely recommend a trip if you can make it out. In terms of COVID precautions, I mean, we were outside the entire time or in the car. um, and we wore our masks when we were around people. Both Stan and I are vaccinated, and now the CDC has released a statement saying that if you are vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask if you're outside. I'm still wearing a mask. I'm not risking it. Um, in terms of, they have signs up that say if you can't maintain your 6 feet distance, wear a mask, which is good. I don't think it was always followed, but that's also because you're hiking pretty strenuous hikes, so masks become like sweaty and wet, and then they don't work anyway. But regardless, I do think it was a COVID-friendly experience overall. If you have any parks that you would recommend us going to, we're trying to hit all 50 states. I don't know what's the best thing to do in your state. If you live in the US, let me know what's the best thing to do in your state. Leave it in the comments down below. Okay, so if you found this video helpful or you enjoyed watching it for the aesthetics, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of our content, click subscribe to join our community and ding the bell button to know when we post, which is every day. But most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!